How about if I just start at the beginning? you could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real world's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins, brought to you by Biofarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, episode 65 with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. How you doing, Don? It's May 16th.
I'm good. How are you, Terry?
I'm good. The time just keeps going faster and faster. It's not going to be long. We're going to be talking about opening day here. It seems to be slipping by really fast.
It is. I'm ready for July 1st. Get them trail cameras out and find them velvet giants.
Yeah, so we got a good bit to talk about tonight. I saw on Instagram this week that you have now finished up all of your spring plots. Did I see that right?
Yep. I've got one plot of or field of switchgrass, and I'm going to drill in with the Genesis drill, hopefully this week. But the food plots are all in, and I finished up yesterday, and I'm real excited about one of these plots. Dwayne Hopkins, our buddy at Kitchen Seed, came up with an idea for a new spring planted blend. And that's all I'm going to say, but I don't want to give anything away for the competition, but it's something that we hadn't even ever discussed in the past. And so I planted a 2-acre plot of that yesterday on not my farm, but another farm that where I have plots and sole hunting permission. And be taking some pictures and video footage over that plot this fall, and just real anxious to see how that one turns out.
Yeah, Dwayne has become one of not only our closest friends, but man, does he have a skill set and knowledge as a seedsman that is better than anybody I've ever met.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt about it. The real world is where it's at today because of Dwayne. Yeah, you know, you bring some marketing skills to the table that are fantastic, and you know, I bring a little bit to the table. But Dwayne, I remember walking into his office probably close to 15 years ago now with the idea of starting a new food plot seed company, and God must have led me in there because it was the right place to go for sure.
Well, let's face it, you can put guys like us around stuff that's in a bag that's not any good. That's what, you know, a lot of the industry is. But what's built the company is basically the content of that bag that Dwayne's kind of behind. You know, speaking of spring food plots, you know, one of the biggest lessons that he taught me was, you know, do it the right way the first time. And, you know, I'm usually a whole lot more prepared than I am this year, but I just now plowed Todd Covey, a good friend of mine from here in northern Kentucky. He actually, I'm not supposed to be on a tractor because of my back right now. He came over and him and his buddy plowed my food plot, and I hadn't even mowed it, hadn't sprayed it, but they plowed on Friday. And if this was me being honest, I maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have been so worried about, you know, missing this perfect window on the calendar. I probably would have gone in and just gone ahead after they plowed and dissed it up and planted this weekend. But, you know, Dwayne's always taught me, you know, you do it right the first time, get that weed seed bed. So I'm going to be a couple weeks later than what I wanted seeding, but it's going to be done the right way the first time. And Dwayne's just been a huge mentor and friend of mine to teach me the right way of doing stuff. Even if I'm 2 weeks later than I should be, it's going to be done the right way.
Well, no doubt about it. Dwayne is a tremendous asset for us. Not only do we lean on him for advice when we need it, but he comes up with some pretty good ideas on his own and shares with us. Yeah. So
So
he's
what
been instrumental in our success.
So what all do you have planted? I already have a lot of clover out, and what I'm got Todd and Wes plowed up for me Friday. That's all going to be in soybeans. I don't know that I'm going to have a place for corn yet on that farm, but I might on another farm. What all do you have in the ground right now for spring plots?
Well, I've got corn and soybeans, and this mix that Dwayne came up with, this test mix. Actually, there's two different mixes. They're very similar. There's just one
tweak a little
difference
bit
between the two of them.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I've got my clover on the farm too.
Sure.
Then I've got a couple plots saved for deadly dozen this fall.
And I know for a fact part of my bean field's going to get mowed down. My thinking is there, like it always is, if I'm going to go ahead and put it all in beans, and then what gets over browsed and doesn't get established, we just put that in deadly dozen in the fall. But I'm still going to provide that food source this time of year, as we transition in. So how do you like, this is your first time planting with the Genesis drill. How do you like that?
Fantastic. I used it Friday and Saturday. I had, with the blends that Dwayne had, I ran 6 different seed species through it, and getting ready to use switchgrass. There's a big difference between, corn, soybeans, switchgrass, and some of the other stuff that I use. But man, that thing, I put in the planter what I think I will take for a plot, and by golly, that's about exactly what it uses.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Wished you had one of those years ago, huh?
Well, it simplifies everything. I'm not out there, in the past, I'd go spray all my plots. I'd give the spray a week or two to work and kill the weeds, and I'd come in and I'd disc the plot. And then I would come back, and I had a drill just for my soybeans. I planted nothing else but soybeans with that drill, so I have to come back and hook onto that, plant my soybeans. And, there was just so much hooking up and unhooking equipment and multiple trips to the plots. And with the sprayer that I put on the front of my tractor and the Genesis drill on the back, I just go in and do it all one time, and I'm done.
Yeah.
And it appears to be working fantastic.
Well, you definitely have a cool setup with your tractor with that front sprayer and the drill on the back. Can we take a little bit of time, though, and let's talk about guys who don't have access to that? I don't know about you, but it seems that I have now become the go-to resource for everybody with any question about herbicides possible, and it gets a little overwhelming when I get all these questions about herbicides and what to use on what. Can we take a couple minutes and talk about that? Maybe it'd be a good resource for the listeners to use.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I'm getting these questions every day too, and some of them, the answers right there on our website or on the back of the bag even. But when we start, I bet between the two of us, and Wes as well, I bet we're answering 100 a day.
Yeah. And trust me, it's not that we're trying to be short with people. It's we're trying to get to all the questions that we get answered. So if we get a very short answer or a scripted answer, a lot of times it's a cut and paste that we answer it so many times. So Dawn and I have talked. We're actually going to try to do more of a FAQ page on our website when it comes to herbicides as a resource, maybe even in our land management guide next year. Have a little bit of this kind of content in it. But let's talk about Gen 2 soybeans. We call them glyphosate tolerant. Really what that is Roundup Ready, but if we put the Roundup word on there, we got to pay a royalty. So can you explain to everybody just what Roundup Ready or glyphosate tolerant means and some of the different plants that are tolerant to that?
Yeah, so the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. So that's why we call them glyphosate tolerant. But it simply means that you can spray glyphosate or Roundup over the top of those soybeans, and it will not harm the soybeans. They're tolerant to it, but that Roundup will kill any weeds that are in there.
So
it makes it very easy.
So Roundup, it can be used pre-germination or post-germination. a lot of people spray different times. I think, if somebody doesn't have a problem with water hemp and mare's tail, I don't here in Kentucky. I try to wait till my beans are about 10 inches tall to spray them with glyphosate. But if somebody's got mare's tail and water hemp, if they wait for those weeds to get that big, it's really hard to kill them. So, depending on your application or your farm, you might need to spray earlier or later, right?
Right. If you've got, actually, it's a good idea to hit those weeds when they're young. I mean, we're
It's just
talking
easier
4
to
inches
kill.
or less.
Easier to
Yeah,
kill.
a whole lot easier to kill. And the other thing is, there's two different modes of action for herbicides. There's the contact herbicide like Roundup or glyphosate, which it has to come in contact with the green part of the plant, the leaf or whatever, and then that plant takes it in and it kills the plant. And then there's pre-emergent or residual herbicides, and those are just sprayed on the soil, and they prevent weeds from ever coming on to begin with.
Right.
And they're not going to work with every weed, or each one of them is not going to work with every single weed. And they also have a lifespan, and a lot of that depends on the rainfall that you get. After so much time and a lot of rain, they're not going to be effective. But, one of the keys with these soybeans, in my opinion, is using a residual. Burn down your field. When I say burn down, I'm not talking fire. I'm talking with a chemical like glyphosate or Roundup. But at the same time, use a residual herbicide in with that, spray it all at once, and not only are you killing the weeds that are there, but you're also putting some of that residual down to prevent future weeds.
Now, with a residual, is it labeled specifically a residual for soybeans or residual for corn?
Yes, absolutely. You cannot use the same residual for both.
So I teed one up. I teed one up for you there.
Yeah.
These are the common questions. Can I use the same residual on corn and beans? No. There's a reason that chemical doesn't let weeds come up, but it will let those beans germinate.
Yep.
Corn and beans are in a different plant family, so it's attacking that plant with a different chemical reaction. Let's talk a little bit about 2,4-D. What is 2,4-D used to kill?
Well, it's also a contact herbicide, but it is only good for broadleaf weeds. It will not harm any grass, and corn is a grass. You can spray 2,4-D right over the top of your corn. It will not harm it whatsoever, but it'll kill any broadleaves that are in that corn, but it will not kill any grasses in your corn. So if you've got foxtail or something like that, 2,4-D won't hurt them at all. So
don't spray 2,4-D on your Gen 2 soybeans because they're only Roundup ready.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what else you can spray on corn, because we in real world we can provide a standard corn or a Roundup Ready corn, but this year we came out with a pilot program, NutriCrave corn. It's not Roundup Ready at all. So talk a little bit about what some options there for people who are planting non-Roundup Ready corn.
Well, if you're planting conventional corn, non-Roundup Ready or non-GMO corn, that's where your residual herbicide is critical. You absolutely have to do that, because once those grasses like foxtail come up, there's very little you can do. Now, there is some things you can do, but there's a lot of things you're going to have an applicator's license and such to buy. But in my opinion, when you're planting this conventional corn, like the NutriCrave corn, you need to be putting down a residual herbicide, either at the time of planting or ahead when you burn down the field, with a herbicide. A couple of atrazines, a residual for corn. Metachlor is another one. The atrazine pretty much, at least in Illinois, it requires a applicator's license, and I think it might in all states. It might be a federal regulation. Metachlor is one you can buy right off the shelf at a lot of farm stores, relatively cheap, about $75 for 2.5 gallons, and that's enough to spray several acres.
So, you're throwing out a lot of brand names of chemicals. One of the things that we kind of get it's frustrating for us, because if we were talking to people that lived in our hometown, we could be a whole lot more specific, because we know what the local Rural King or farm store or even ag chem place has. With us and how big Real World is, how big the podcast is, we get a lot of questions and say, we don't have access to that, or what is that? That's where you really need, it's not that we're trying to dodge a bullet. Your phone call to your local ag chem rep is the best thing for you, and telling them. So you can tell them, say, I have a non-GMO corn, or I have a non-Roundup ready corn. What can I spray pre or post emerge? I have, back years ago, Roundup had a patent and you couldn't buy a generic of glyphosate. So you can go into those farm stores and say, what are my options? Tell them what you're trying to plant. The last question I want to tee up for you a little bit is the Enlist beans. And, the deal with Enlist 3, which is what our pilot program is, you're actually able to use 3 different herbicides. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, the Enlist bean was developed because of weed resistance to Roundup. There's a lot of mare's tail and water hemp you mentioned, Terry, that Roundup just won't hardly touch those weeds anymore. They become resistant just as the soybean's resistant. So the Enlist soybean, you're able to spray 3 different chemicals on that soybean, and the bean will tolerate it. That allow you to kill those weeds, and you can use Roundup or glyphosate, and you can use Liberty, and you can use 2,4-D. So, it gives you 3 different options to kill those weeds that have become resistant. And with those 3, you should be able to kill any weed out there. But the key, again, is to get on them young. There's things like water hemp, mare's tail, pigweed. Once they start getting some size on them, they're very difficult to kill. You definitely want to hit those weeds when they're under 6 inches, and preferably 4 inches and under. And then you can pretty much control them.
Now, just because that Enlist 3 trait bean says that you can spray all 3 does not mean you can put all 3 of them in a sprayer and spray them at the same time, though, right?
Well, you can mix some, but now the 2 you don't want to mix are Liberty and Roundup. Those 2, for whatever reason, they just don't mix very well. Liberty is one that does very well on a lot of broadleafs, but it doesn't do very well on grasses. Roundup, on the other hand, does pretty well on grasses.
Right.
And then 2,4-D is a broadleaf only herbicide. So you can mix 2,4-D with either of the other 2, but you can't mix you can. It's not going to work very well.
They fight each other a little bit with what they're trying to do to that plant.
Right.
So anyway, I know that's a very, very basic overview. But we're in planting season right now. There's a lot of people that are, like Don, that are just finishing up. There's a lot of people like me that are just getting started. We got a few weeks into early July that we'll be planting and then having to spray. So we got quite a few opportunities that we can discuss specifics. If our listeners have specific questions about herbicides, chemical plans and that kind of stuff, we'll try to answer them. And maybe if we get a ton of these questions, we can get one of our local ag chem guys on the line with us to answer some of the questions if we have enough interest in that. So again, we want to talk about what you guys want to talk about and what's resources for you. I hope that brief overview was helpful, but submit some questions if there's other stuff. But I'll be honest with you, usually your answer is already on the label on the jug that you've already bought. But, it's funny because some people will call me and say, well, I got 41% glyphosate. What ratio do I mix it? And I tell them you can pour the concentrate straight on the plant, not hurt it. It's just how much money you're going to waste doing it. So, your instructions are your best friend. But anyway, if you got questions, reach out to us. The other cool thing that you posted about this week, I'm not sure what day it was, maybe yesterday or even today, you got a picture of a fawn already.
Yeah, I think it was Friday or so that I got the picture. I didn't post it. I think it was this morning when I posted it. But, I'm messing with these cell cameras on the property in Iowa that I have permission. And I think it was Friday. I looked at my phone. I had a new picture, and it was a fawn, and I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a little bit early, and I started doing the math. The gestation period for the whitetail is about 200, maybe 202 days, and that fawn looked to be maybe a couple days old, and I figured that doe had to have got bred about October 22nd, give or take a couple days, and well, that's pretty early. I can tell you that, and I mentioned it in my post, that, I had those captive research deer for 25 years. And in that 25 years, I only had one doe in 25 years that was bred in October. I know it happens. And when you start talking about millions of deer out in the wild, there's going to be a good number of them. But percentage-wise, it's very, very low that a doe gets bred in October. So this fawn definitely came from one of those.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some trail camera pictures of a fawn in Pennsylvania, and so we're not, everybody wants to make a line in the sand when you say something and say, oh, but in 1986 this happened.
Yeah.
Nature's going to have its anomalies, but you're just speaking of the general research that you've done and the 99.8% of wild deer herd that's going to be out there. My question to you is, I hate always drawing an analogy of a pregnant doe back to a pregnant human. But, my son, Jonathan, he was born at 30 and a half, 31 weeks as a preemie. Does nature always use that 200-day gestation, or could a doe have a preemie as a doe or as a little fawn and be a week or two early?
Well, I'm sure it can happen early. I know, when I had those captive deer, that typically that 200 to say 202, 204, that's when that would take in the majority of fawns.
Yeah.
I did a lot of artificial insemination with those does over the years. So I knew knew not only the day they were getting bred, I knew the exact hour they were bred.
Yeah.
And, when you go out there and you breed 10, 15 does artificially in one morning, those does you would think would all have fawns the same day or within a day or two. And they would generally be spread out over about 4 days.
Yeah. Well,
starting about 200 to 204.
Look at the cattle industry. I mean, good grief. They can time, calving season for spring and fall calving season down to a really, really small window. So,
Yep.
It's very interesting to note, though, because I think somebody made a post on your comment on your post about how they've noticed on one farm that there's been an early fawn every year. And I think he even made mention that he changes the way he hunts now because of that. And I don't know if that holds a lot of water for me, but when you do think about this farm that you're talking about in Iowa, if that doe did get bred the last week of October, based on the past research that you've talked about on the show, she's probably going to come into heat the same time every year, though, right?
Yeah, there's a real good chance of that, and that's a great point, Terry. So I'm going to need to be paying attention that last week of October to weather fronts and things, and if things line up and wind conditions or wind directions are right for the stands I've hung, I need to be over there.
So it's not necessarily that all does. You still believe that all does are going to come into heat that magic day of November, where we've talked about before. But if you do notice a fawn that gets dropped early, back up your 200 days, and that might be the first doe that comes into heat that could get those bucks on their feet, depending on the weather conditions around that time period of end of October, though.
And the other thing is, at that time of the year, there's not going to be very many does in heat. So when there is one, she's likely to have a half a dozen bucks with her.
Exactly. They're going to be, they're at fever pitch mode, chasing, looking, and then all of a sudden there's a hot doe that it's going to be on, but again, it's not your entire, people always mention, oh, it's an early rut this year. well, you might have anomaly of one of these does, or you might see something based on weather, but it's definitely something to keep your eye on now that you know you have a potential doe that got bred in October.
Well, and people need to realize that there are literally millions of wild does in the United States. And 100 of them could do something, and that's not even a tenth of a percent.
Right.
So just because you see one thing, I mean, that doesn't make it a high odds, proposition that you're going to see that again.
You got to play a little bit of money ball, like the old baseball
Yep.
terminology. You got to play your best chances. So I don't want to necessarily cut this topic short, but we're at the 25-minute mark, and I messed up last week and didn't let you make an announcement before the 30-minute mark for our Amish friends listening on MTech. Why don't you go ahead and re-announce this new service that we heard about, because I know a lot of our Amish friends are going to get cut off here at the 30-minute mark. Why don't you talk a little bit about the new number?
Yeah, and I actually had a couple of calls this week from Amish people about this. But so the MTech number that we've used in the past, it'll absolutely work, but it cuts you off at 30 minutes unless you're a subscriber. But we just learned about a week or so ago of another number that you can call and listen to the podcast in its entirety. And you can even go back, supposedly, I haven't checked this out, but I was told you can go back and listen to past episodes. And a lot of our Amish friends are listening this way instead of, through apps on a phone or whatever. So that number is 1-978-599-7610. And I'll say it again, just in case you guys are in your phone check or whatever and scrambling for a pen. It's 1-978-599-7610. And you can call that number in. You don't have to push an extension or nothing. Just the podcast will start playing and you can listen in its entirety.
Yeah, and we're not real familiar with how you can go back and listen to other episodes or anything like that, but we've been told you can. So it doesn't mean we're going to get rid of using the MTech service. MTech will still carry it, so please feel free to use that, especially if you're a subscriber. But we just thought this would be an extra resource for our Amish friends to listen to. So wanted to get that out of the way before we hit the 30-minute mark tonight.
Yep.
All right.
So, do you have an update for Lester's feet?
Yeah, we've surpassed that $30,000 mark that we're raising for families. I've gotten to speak with a couple more target families this week. Some of the situations we're learning about and making contact about, the children are, I don't know what the proper phrasing. They're early in their diagnosis and treatment. So, like the Ward family, because they had the older daughter that had already had it, the younger daughter who was diagnosed with it, they're already years into this journey. With some of the other families that we're just learning about, they've just been diagnosed a couple months ago and starting treatment. So we're still trying to navigate with them what the need is going to be, but we've already the list is already getting long, and that's a great thing. I don't want that to discourage people from reaching out to me and making suggestions or making contact with people who have sick children. We're going to have enough. This is the blessing that this thing is given to us, is we're going to have the blessing of a lot of money to help a lot of families. So my goal is to go ahead and start developing these relationships, learning about the situations, the way we can help. That way, as soon as this raffle closes, we can get that money in the hands of these families. It does no good sitting in a bank account waiting for somebody to call us. So my goal is to go ahead and make these relationships and meet these people, start praying for them, share their stories so all of you all can pray for them. And that way, as soon as this money is basically liquid, we can start paying bills for families. So it's a blessing to be able to meet and learn about these different situations with these sick kids. And please, if you know somebody who needs help, please reach out to me. But We're well over $30,000 already. I want to thank Busy Beaver Publication. They're the magazine that goes out to our Amish community. Our friends at Deer and Deer Hunting are putting in a ad to share the raffle. Iowa Sportsman's putting it in theirs. So there's 3 major publications that are going out to thousands and thousands of people to help spread the word about this. My friend Wes at the YouTube channel Fall Line Ridge is going to be sharing it on his YouTube channel that goes out to like 250,000 viewers every week. So it's just a blessing that people have enough faith in what we're doing that they want to get on board and help and spread the word. So again, please follow along to the Lester's Feet Foundation Facebook page, and we're going to continue in this journey. I just finished up tonight. We were a little bit behind schedule recording the podcast. I actually had to deliver the last of the senior plaques that came out of the wood shop for this year's seniors, which is another little project that I do here in the local community. So follow along on our Facebook page and reach out to us if you know of a family we can help.
Yeah, and I'm going to challenge all our listeners. I know a lot of you have already purchased tickets, but, if each of you would just take it upon yourselves to share with at least one friend about this podcast and about Lester's Feet, the charity that Terry has started, encourage them to buy tickets. I'd like to see, this raffle raise at least $50,000, and 100% of it's going to go to these families. A lot of prizes were given away, including a hunt on Terry's farm and another hunt on my farm. And, we just want to make this as big as possible, because the bigger it is, the more people we can help. And you folks can all help us do that.
Well, we've been accused of always telling it like it is, and I hope people take this as somewhat respectful, but somewhat saying it like it is. It's really disappointing to me that the outdoor community will share and like and get all crazy when Don shoots a 200-inch buck, and one post will have a gazillion shares to it. But when we're trying to do something to help pay medical bills or other type bills for a family that's got sick kids, and only 3 or 4 of us will step up and share that. I know we're better than that as people in the hunting community. So I just challenge you, when you see this kind of stuff, it's treat it like one of us just shot a 200-inch buck. We really need the help spreading the word. The more families we can help, the more blessings will be to people who really need it. And it's a little frustrating to me when we'll go out of our way to share a big buck picture, but we can't share something that's out there to help a family.
Or think of it as if your child was one of these that's fighting a life-threatening illness. How would you want others to react? And, we're trying to do our best to raise money for these folks, but it takes other people helping us get the word out. So we just appreciate anything that you folks are willing to do.
Yeah, it's very humbling how much support we have. So we really appreciate that. Speaking of support, why don't we go into our feature sponsor of the podcast, the Biofarm.com Property of the Week.
Biofarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, this episode's featured property is a brand new listing. It's 198 plus or minus acres in White County, Illinois. For those of you not familiar with White County, it's on the eastern side of the state next to Indiana, very close to Interstate 64, along the Wabash River. Some great hunting in White County. But this 198 acres, about half of it is tillable and half of it is wooded. It had been logged, I think, about 10 years or so ago, but there's another timber crop coming on. You can get on the Biofarm.com website and see some photos of the timbers. You'll see there's some nice size mature oak trees in there that they're going to have some value real soon. The 99 acres, that could either be farmed or put in CRP, and either way, you get an income from it. So it's a property that's not only going to be able to give you a place to hunt, but with half of it being tillable, there'll be some good income as well. Good soil types on the farm. Taxes are cheap, $1,742 on the whole property. The exact location is it's just a little bit northeast of Carmi, Illinois, or southeast of Crossville, Illinois. Again, it's real close to the Indiana line, so anyone coming from that direction on Interstate 64, you're not far off of 64 and not far into Illinois. So give you an idea of how long it would take you to get there.
Well, I want to make a statement, and guys like you or our buddy Josh Pretzer, who's a big row crop farmer out in Kansas, might cringe at this comment that I say, but for properties like this that has this much tillable acres, with the corn prices going up, there should be a line waiting of people wanting to put this in corn next year. I would think you shouldn't have any problem leasing this out if you were to buy it as a hunting property and finding one of those local row crop farmers that would want to put crops in this with the way the crop prices have gone up. Am I exaggerating that, or is that got some?
No, not at all. With nearly 100 tillable acres, I mean, and I don't know what's corn pushing $7 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You won't have any trouble finding anybody to farm it, that's for sure.
Right. And
you make more money than you would CRP, but if you're into hunting, the CRP, or at least part of it in CRP, might make sense for you. But anyway, the agent on this one is Don Bailey, and Don's phone number is 618-919-1031, and you can also see it on the Biofarm.com website. It'll be under the new listings, or just look for the 198 acres in White County.
Yeah, so check it out. If it's a opportunity that you could use the ag side to help pay for some hunting property, then maybe a great idea to phase in a plan just near the Indiana Illinois line. So give Don Bailey a call or visit biofarm.com and search White County, Illinois.
Yep.
I was talking about those crop prices. We've talked about this for a couple years now, that both of us have pretty much stopped watching TV. One of the YouTube channels that I watch is a family farm up in Minnesota called Larson Farms. And they were talking the other day about how much, because of the corn prices, how much corn on corn. They're not even rotating back to beans. They're going to go ahead and plant corn back in cornfields, just because of that corn prices being so high, up around $7. So it's interesting how all that's really affected the agriculture side.
Oh, for sure. We went through a cycle a few years ago where the crop prices went up before they leveled out and came back down, and the bad thing was it drove the price of all the fertilizers and chemicals right up with it, because I think some of those companies knew that the farmers had bigger profit margins, and they wanted to get part of that in their pocket.
So all the input costs also goes up, so then your margin ends up being the same. So,
right.
But anyway, we definitely don't hide our faith on this show, and if anybody out there watches the YouTube channel Larson Farms, they know that that the guy that does that video series, his wife Nikki is battling a very serious situation with cancer. She actually edits the videos that they publish, I think 3-4 times a week. So our prayers are definitely with their family, and Nikki, as she's a young girl, early 20s, has cancer. So we definitely want to keep them in our prayers. I don't know them, but doesn't mean we can't pray for them. So with that, hopefully we're going to still get caught up on some of these questions. It was really fun doing the live segments through trade show season and the master class, but we did get behind on some of our questions. So the last couple of weeks we've been knocking quite a few of these out. So do you have some we're going to hit tonight? Yeah,
for sure. And Terry, I looked, and we've got over 300 submitted questions that have not been answered. So I went way back on the list for some of these today. Some of these people, I'm going to call your name and you're going to even forget you submitted a question because they've been out there. And I wanted a variety of topics. So I kind of picked from here and there in that list of 300, but some of these were submitted a good long time ago.
Well, hopefully that won't deter people from still submitting questions. So again,
right.
the more we can make this show about what you guys want to talk about, that makes us happier. So I think that's what makes this show a little bit more special than other things out there. So let's get to it.
The first question comes from Nolan from Minnesota. Nolan says, Don, I am a strong believer in burning and have a few planned for this spring once my place dries up. I am planning to plant switchgrass into these areas I burn because there isn't much switchgrass left in the areas. The questions I have for you are, would it be better to drill or broadcast the seed after the burn? And would it be worth stratifying the seed prior to planting into the burn area? Why or why not? Same goes for places that have been tilled up and have a good seed bed. Thanks. Well, burning is as Terry will attest to, I burn parts of my farm every year as far as the native grasses. Once or twice, a place or two I didn't really want to burn, but anyway, yeah, burning's fantastic. The issue with broadcasting the seed after the burn is usually by the time you get it burned, the freezing and thawing, you're not getting too many cold temperatures, down in where you're getting solid freezes.
Great point.
You may get some frost and such, but you're not getting those hard freezes. So if you've got a drill, that's how I would go.
Stop there for just a second. What you're saying is that to broadcast, you need really good soil contact, and part of the process of frost seeding is that freezing and thawing sucks that down into it to get it ready, and you just don't get a lot of that late in the year or late in the spring. Okay.
Right.
All right.
So in a situation where you burn the field off, and most of the time you're going to be better off just to till it. The issue, or to drill it rather. The issue with drilling is it's very easy to get that switchgrass seed too deep. Anything over a quarter inch is too deep. Ideally, you want about 1/8 of an inch seed depth.
Right.
So you got to be really careful with that drill. As far as stratifying the seed, yeah, it helps to some degree. That seed's going to grow anyway. If you look at a label on switchgrass, it's going to have a germination rate, and then it's going to have a hard seed. And that hard seed is seed that's good, viable seed, but during the germination test at the lab, it did not sprout or germinate because it's got a hard shell on it. Now, once that seed sits out, in a field, and sometimes it has to sit there for a year, to go through the winter of freezing and thawing, and the second spring is when it'll grow. Well, stratifying the seed, you can get that seed to germinate the first spring instead of having to sit there for a year and germinate the second spring. So it is good to stratify, but you're going to get a stand of switchgrass anyway. You're just going to get a better germination rate by stratifying that seed.
But the faster we get that seed to germinate, the less we have to worry about competitive weeds, though, right?
Right.
And the more we get that field to fill in with it's great that, you put it in the ground and then, it'll germ next year. There's a lot of weeds that we have to deal with in the meantime, though, right?
Right. So. Yeah, I mean, it's better for it to germinate as soon as possible, but that's why you stratify.
You've talked about, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead on where you were going with this question, but if it's a field that has a lot of weeds, or you're converting pasture or something over into it, and you're this late, might be a better idea to put that in soybeans and prepare it for switchgrass for next year to have more of an effective stand.
Yep.
If you're just now doing it.
That is true.
Of course, this is Minnesota, so they're a little bit behind us in Kentucky, that's for sure.
Yep. He says same goes for places that have been tilled up and have a good seed bed. You know, and those drilling versus broadcasting, it just depends on the time of the year. I mean, if you're this late, you know, I would go ahead and drill it. If you're early in the winter, I would broadcast it if you can. If you can broadcast it, basically frost seed it, that's the route I would go. But once you get this late, I think drilling is the way to go. So
you talked about actually drilling it on frozen ground too.
Yep.
As a real good. That way you don't have to worry about that drill sinking into the soft dirt, and getting it too
for
deep.
sure. All right, so that's a great way to do it.
All right.
Okay, move on to the next question. It comes from Ray South from Oakwood, Illinois. I know Ray. Ray says, will you and your team point out the benefits of trapping coyotes? Coyotes kill more deer, parentheses fawns, than anything else. A well cared for food plot and bedding area do nothing for a fawn that has been eaten by a coyote. In 2017, I took 17 coyotes from a 20-acre field.
Goodness.
The following year, the fawn count was way up. A foothold traps 24 hours a day. Thanks, Mr. Higgins. Ray, I had a very similar experience on my farm a few years ago. My deer numbers were down. This would have been probably not too far after the EHD outbreak in 2012. The deer numbers were down on this farm, and I was actually, when I would check my trail cameras, I would literally get as many coyote pictures as I would deer pictures. And I would go hunting, and I would see coyotes just about every hunt. I ended up calling in a trapper. My buddy Joe Johnson has a brother-in-law, Rob, that is a fantastic coyote trapper. And I called him in. And in about 3 weeks' time, he trapped 14 of them on my place. And that same fall, I shot 3 with my bow, and I got a couple with a rifle too after season. So we took about pushing 20 coyotes off my 120 acres in one fall and winter. And the next year, it made all the difference in the world. I was back to getting, 99% deer pictures, 1% coyote pictures, which is as it should be. I know of another property where in the past, I've hunted the property for, 25 years, and it was always a fantastic deer property. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, over a period of time, it just kind of tapered off, and the deer hunting became less and less, but the coyotes on the property just became more and more. And I have no doubt that there's a correlation between the two. As the coyotes moved in, the deer moved off. It's a small property, and to this day, there's a coyote issue on that property that I've been trying to take care of. The landowner is not too crazy about letting other people in there to trap or to hunt. So I'm kind of trying to deal with it on my own. And I get so busy in the winter with consulting and such, I just don't have that much time to devote to it. But coyotes can be a real issue on a property. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Trapping coyotes is a good way to do it. But also in my area, these guys using the night vision and thermal scopes are wiping them out at night. And I think it's a fantastic thing that these guys are doing, because they've made a big dent in the coyote population around my area.
Yeah, I'm building a 6.5 Creedmoor that's suppressed with a thermal on it right now for just that cause. So we'll be able to sit back down here in Kentucky and plunk them off with a thermal with a suppressor on it. So that should be a lot of fun.
Well, hopefully you can sit down there in Kentucky and shoot them off my farm in Illinois.
It's a long range rifle, I will admit, but I don't think it's that long of a range. It's funny because I complain about my turkey population being so high, and a lot of that is because we take care of all the coyotes where I'm at. You know, coyotes eat a lot of eggs just like they kill a lot of fawns. But if I have the choice of whether to have my fawns or turkeys running around, I'll take the turkeys over not having them eat my fawns. So that's one of the big things about our place is we keep the coyotes under control. But I agree 100%.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. It comes from Kenneth Luckstead from Anamosa, Iowa. He says, thanks for doing the pod. I finished a 4-year quest last fall, and listening to podcasts you were a guest on, as well as reading your books, helped me achieve that goal. My question is, are there any trees that do really well in a wet spot in a non-farmable CRP area I have? It does dry up at times, but going to have water more than not. Trying to find a way to utilize the area to help the deer. Open to other ideas if trees aren't the best route. Thanks again. You have made me a better and more successful deer hunter. Kenneth, I would look at bald cypress trees. Bald cypress trees are the ones that grow in the cypress swamps in the south. They get the big tapered trunks down towards the bottom. Those trees are some of the most hardy trees and adaptable trees that you'll ever find. They can grow on extremely dry sites, and they can grow in standing water. In fact, if I had a pond on my property, which I don't, I would stick a few bald cypress trees right at the water's edge, just to diversify the habitat some. I would start with potted trees. I wouldn't start with seedlings, but you can go in there with some potted bald cypress trees. And the other thing about bald cypress is deer absolutely love to rub them. When I had the tree nursery years ago, I would have rows of different species of trees, rows of maples, rows of different oaks, and this and that. The deer would actually go right down the rows of bald cypress and rub every single tree. And literally the rows right next to them would not have a rub on them, but there's something about them bald cypress that the bucks just absolutely love.
That's interesting.
And I don't know if it's the odor or what it is about them.
Do they need to have wet feet to flourish, or will they work in normal ground also?
No, the interesting thing was in St. Louis, in one of the planter boxes down by Busch Stadium where the Cardinals play. There was in some of these planter boxes on the city streets, they couldn't get any variety or any species of tree to live in, and they tried bald cypress, and bald cypress was the only tree that would live there and grow there. They are very adaptable to extremely dry or extremely wet sites. But when they grow on those wet sites is when they're really neat, because that's what makes those trunks really flare out at the bottom. Mm-hmm. You've probably seen in like some of the duck commander photos and such, those cypress swamps where they shoot the ducks. Same tree, but makes great deer habitat too. So that's one tree if there's a lot of standing water. Another one is a swamp white oak will do good in those areas. Pin oaks will do pretty good. Actually, they'll do real good. It just depends on how much water and for how long. Bur oaks is another one that'll do good in bottom areas. Overcup oak. Those would be the ones. There's others too, but those would be the primary ones that I'd be looking at.
I think you said Kenneth was from Iowa. There's no, all of those can be used that far north. No issue there.
Yeah. Yep, even that bald cypress, I mean, they'll grow way up into North Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
No problem with them.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
All
right, last question comes from Nate Brummer from Jefferson City, Missouri. He says, hey, Don, I have a very simple question in regards to deer nutrition. On our farm of 700 acres, our farm of 700 acres is a dairy farm with a crop rotation being only corn or alfalfa in the summer and winter wheat or rye and oats in the winter? Are the bucks in the area getting the nutrients they need to reach their full potential, or do I need to think about planting real world beans for them? I cannot plant beans anywhere in the fields, but I have about 2 acres of tillable ground to use. There's about 200 acres of corn every summer and about 50 acres of alfalfa. The corn acres being planted in wheat for the winter. Thanks. Soybeans in the summer are not going to be better than your alfalfa. There's just absolutely nothing better than alfalfa in the summer as far as nutrient content. So the real world beans would not gain you a thing in the summertime. However, if you can keep the deer off of them in the summer and get a nice crop of grain for the winter time, it says in the winter, you're limited to
Wheat and
winter
rye.
wheat or rye and oats. If you could have some grain to go with that, that's when the soybeans would really shine. So, yeah, in that case, I definitely would try to get some real world beans growing in there.
Yeah, because then you got a grain protein source all through the winter to match that cereal grain. That cereal grain's just not going to give a ton of protein or fat, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And then I'm assuming since it's a dairy farm, they're probably chopping the corn, I would guess, while it's still green for silage, I would guess.
Probably.
So, the corn's going to be gone fairly early before it dries and matures down. They'll chop it out, and then they're probably double cropping in their cereal grain on top of that is what my guess would be. But that first frost, that first real heavy frost, the nutrition value of the alfalfa goes way down.
Right.
So.
Yep.
Yeah, it might be worth something to try and help them out a little bit more through the winter. And it's going to draw your late season too, especially when it's real cold in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
So
we was all over the place with questions today. That was my intent. Had a nutrition question, a coyote question, a tree question, a switchgrass question. So I think that's what I'm going to try to do as we clean up some of them old questions. And, a lot of those 300 questions that I mentioned that have not been answered yet, there's a lot of repeats. So, there may be 10 people ask the same question, and I picked the one that I think, words it the best. So please keep submitting your questions.
Yeah, it helps us to be able to talk about what you want to talk about. So, and if you want to dive in a little bit more to the herbicide discussion, again, submit those, and if we can't answer, we'll get somebody on that can. But we appreciate everybody submitting questions. It makes the discussion a whole lot more interesting.
For sure.
All right, so what's on the docket for this coming week?
Well, I've got to go pick out brick for a new house tomorrow. Then I've got what am I going to do? I got some mowing to do around the farm here. My cattle pasture's getting growed up. So this is probably the next month or so is probably when I will do the least. Now that my plots are in, I'll probably do the least amount of deer stuff as any month in the whole year. But, man, I'm just sitting here already chomping at the bit, waiting on the 1st of July so I can get the cameras out.
Yep, stocking up on your Energizer lithium batteries when they go on sale.
Yep.
By the way, you need to go up there to my Wi-Fi camera on the telephone pole and change the batteries in it so I can keep an eye on your house being built. The batteries are dead for me.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a big pile of dirt right in front of it. You wouldn't be able to see anything, but that got leveled out. So now you'll be able to see it coming up.
So our buddy Harold Monk and the team down at Wi-Fi, they're working on some new analytic reports to pick out vehicles or pick out people, or I don't know what all they're trying. They're always pushing the envelope of different management tools that can be in the trail camera analytics for when it filters it. So I don't know that they have dirt pile in the query when you use it in hunt control, but no, I'm excited for you and Robin getting that house built, and it's gonna be really nice. So do they have it framed yet?
No, they just poured the basement Monday.
Okay, so that'll be cured, and then they'll put subfloor down and
Yep.
start framing it. It won't be long. They'll move pretty quick on it, I'm sure.
Yeah, and there's something interesting about this whole thing. I'm going to tie it back to deer. Everything I do gets tied back to deer. So they put the drain tile, around the basement. There's two drain tiles, one right around the outside edge at the bottom and one inside before they pour the floor. Under that floor is a drain tile.
Yeah.
To get water away,
Mm-hmm.
Well, they ran that water out, where the house is sitting and everything. It kind of runs downhill into that switchgrass field.
Right.
They ran a drain tile back there, and I wasn't around, and they ended that drain tile right at the edge of my food plot. The food plot that wrapped around there.
Yep.
And so we've had enough. We haven't had a lot of rain. We've had enough. There's water in the ground, and so water has been trickling out of that pipe. And there's a wet area where that water is coming out. About the size of a pickup truck, maybe. And it's kind of puddled just a little bit there where this thing's dripping. Well, I was noticing a couple of days ago that wet, muddy area around that pipe is just solid deer tracks. I mean, it's just track on top of tracks. Those deer are coming and they're drinking that water that's coming out of that drain pipe.
Huh.
Well, I got to thinking about this, and it's not that far from the house. I'm gonna dig me I'm gonna plant me a pond, a little watering hole right there.
It's a self-filling watering hole.
Yeah, and that pipe is going to run into that water tank. It's going to be I was just on the internet today looking at those round stock tanks. You can get one of those that's 10 foot around. I'm going to bury it, half of it in the ground, at least, maybe 2/3 of it in the ground. Leave it sticking up about 8 or 10 inches, and then I'm going to run that pipe right into it. And it'll be only probably no more than about 40 to 50 yards off of my patio. And I'm going to be able to watch the deer come and drink that water.
You'll be able to watch all kinds of wildlife, the pheasants and everything else will be using it. So that'll be cool.
Here I bashed everybody for this plastic kiddie pool water holes, and I'm going to have one in my backyard.
Well, the coyotes will come up there and drink out of it, and you can shoot them off your back deck.
I was going to say they won't leave.
Yeah, you need to get you a suppressor. That way you don't put any put intrusion on your bedding area there when the coyotes are drinking out of the stock tank.
Well, we just had somebody offer to help us with that because he's a dealer in suppressors.
Yeah, might have to take him up on that.
Yep.
So. All right, well, we want to thank everybody for listening. I hope that the flood of or the bouncing around of a bunch of different topics was interesting for you tonight. Again, we want to make this about what you want to talk about, so we appreciate everybody's support. And unless you got anything else, Don, why don't you take us out with our sponsors?
All right, we want to thank our sponsors, Biofarm.com, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, Matthews Archery, Vortex Optics, Lone Wolf Tree Stand, Vengeance Camo, and Real World Wildlife Products. Have a great week, everyone.